Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I want to talk to you about why I'm a TBR kind of a guy and how that helps me manage stress in my life. So normally on a Tuesday I put up a tag video. This is something slightly different, but it's similar in that it is engaging in a conversation that somebody else started on their channel. So a fellow booktuber called MJ from the channel Reading This Life put up a video in the last week or so where she talked about why she is a mood reader. And I consider myself to be what is kind of the opposite of that, which is a TBR reader. So TBR stands for to be read. And basically, if you're a TBR reader like I am, you set up a structure for what you're going to be reading. So at the beginning of each month, or indeed towards the end of the preceding month, I come up with a list of books that I'm planning to read in the month ahead. And I normally talk about those in a video as well. And I am very, very structured about that. MJ, on the other hand, is a mood reader, so while she might have some idea of the book she's going to be reading in the month ahead, particularly if she's taking part in, like a buddy read or a group read or something like that, she's much more driven by, how she's feeling on a given day, and what that means she's going to end up reading could change day to day. And MJ says in her video that she's quite happy to put down a book midway because she's not feeling it, pick up something else, and then maybe go back to that initial book. A few other things that MJ says in her video, which I thought were interesting and worth reflecting on, are that she considers every book in her home to be on her TBR. So she doesn't set a TBR because everything's on her TBR, and therefore she's a mood reader and she just picks what she fancies. She also said she doesn't like having rules, and I completely get that. For something like reading, which is a hobby, which is supposed to be fun, I completely understand why you might not want to have structure and rules around it. And as MJ says in her video, there's more than enough structure and rules in our lives already without us needing to add more, feeling the need to add more. And MJ also says that by not having a TBR, she feels less stressed by her reading. She doesn't feel she has to meet certain targets and read certain books and things like that, so it just makes the whole process more enjoyable for her. And I completely get that, and I completely get why being a mood reader probably feels more natural. And certainly before I started, not necessarily before I started BookTube, but before I started reviewing. So before BookTube, I'd been reviewing on blogs and things like that for a few years. So I'd been, rather than talking about books, I've been writing about books and writing about the books I was reading, and had a steady flow of books, coming into my home or onto my Kindle that I knew I wanted to read for, a review or something like that. And indeed, the Carry On Screaming series, which I'm doing on the channel at the moment, started life as a series of reviews on a website where I would review, one book per month that was a vintage British horror book, and that whole flow of books and knowing that I had deadlines effectively to write reviews and things like that meant I needed to have a bit of structure to my reading. Prior to that, I didn't have any structure to my reading, and I was much more of a mood reader. Occasionally I would set myself challenges, and I would be I was part of book clubs and things like that, but aside from that there was really no structure, and I literally would finish a book and then think, well, what do I want to read next? Pick something else up. So starting to write reviews meant I needed to have a bit of structure to my reading, and having the channel has meant that's even more true. So because I put up at the moment like 2 review videos a week, I need to know that I'm going to be reading 2 books that are suitable for review, that are appropriate books to be reviewed on the channel. So that's one thing. And I also have kind of gone out of my way to make things difficult for myself, it may appear to some people, by setting myself other challenges on top of that. So, I'm doing this 50 books I want to read before I'm 50 thing. I'm reading all of Patricia Highsmith's books this year. I'm reading, classics that were recommended by Michael K. Vaughan. I'm reading disturbing books that are recommended by my viewers. So there's a whole load of different things going on there that mean I need to have a bit of structure to my TBR. and I do, and I'll flash up the spreadsheet I use to track my reading, and I probably do this. You know, I suspect I have even more structure than many people who are TBR readers, and I'll talk in a minute about why I do that. But basically, you know, just before the start of every month, I list out all the books. I think about the books I need to read in order to, you know, to fulfil my requirements to, you know, to write reviews, or sorry, to make review videos and things like that, and to, you know, be involved in buddy reads and group reads I've said I'm going to do, and I list those books with, you know, what the commitment is, why I'm doing that thing, so I don't forget. And then I also note how many pages there are in that book, and I know roughly how many pages I can read in a month, you know, kind of 5,000 or 6,000. And so I know then how much space I've got left in the month for other things. And I have tried a number of times in the past to move away from having a TBR, either just to not have one at all, or to just, you know, structure it in terms of the things I know I really ought to rereading that month, and just leave the rest of it blank. But I found if I do that, I lose my way. Somehow it just doesn't work for me. I'm someone who needs the structure of having a list of things. And I think there's a few reasons why that's the case. So the first one is, as MJ said, you know, every book in the house is on my TBR. So all of these books, ones I haven't read and even ones I have read, they're on my TBR. I've got, you know, 2,500 books on my Kindle. They're on my TBR as well. I might go to the library, you know, that's another source of things for my TBR. So that, to me personally, clearly for some people that works. To me personally, that feels overwhelming. If I finish a book and I think, right, I finished the book, what am I going to read next? I've got 3,000 possibilities. Yeah, that's too much. I can't deal with that. By having a structured TBR where I think about, these are the things I think I'm going to want to read this month, I don't have to look at my shelves, I don't have to look at my Kindle, I look at my spreadsheet, which sounds really anal, doesn't it? It sounds ridiculous, but I look at my spreadsheet and I think, oh well, I've got 20 books on this. That's a really manageable number to pick from. Out of those 20, what do I think I'm going to read next? And I'll pick that book up. So that really helps. It really helps me to manage the overwhelming number of books I've got to read, and to give a bit of structure to my reading. And the other thing is, you know, MJ talked in her video about, and I will link to her video in the description for this. So MJ talked about not wanting reading to be stressful. So for me, if I don't have that structure, I find it stressful. I find having a real structure to what I'm doing a way to manage my stress. And I'm exactly the same in my work life. I'm very much like a list maker. Every day when I start work, I make a list of the things I need to do that day. And I have a longer list of, you know, the things I need to do generally. And I will pick the things that I think are manageable for that day. And those will be the things that go in the list for the day. That's how I have to manage my time. And it helps me to manage my stress at work by having that list, so it feels, you know, it's a finite number of things, it feels manageable, and I can tick those things off as I go, which in itself is satisfying as well. And I'm not saying I have like a massively stressful job, but I think, you know, everyone's jobs have a bit of stress in them nowadays, don't they? So finding ways to manage stress in your work life, I think, is really important. The other thing for me about having that list is it contains things. And at the end of the day, I can look at that list and think, well, you know, I got 4 things done, but I didn't get the 5th thing done, but I can put that on my list for tomorrow. And by doing that, I know that I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think about it anymore because it's on the list and I can worry about it tomorrow. So at the end of the work day, I can put aside work stresses and focus on other things. And for me, having it, you know, that has become a natural habit for how I organise my life, I suppose. And by having a written TBR with all the things I want to read in the month, it feels almost comforting. Comforting seems a strange word for it, but it contains it. It feels finite, and I know, I'm not someone who, I don't beat myself up at the end of the month if I haven't read everything on my TBR. I will try and prioritise things, so I make sure I'm reading the things that I have, some kind of commitment to read, either for, a buddy read or a book club or whatever, or because I want to do a review this month on the channel for that book. But there will always be things on my TBR which I don't have to read that month. And if they spill over into the following month, it's not a big deal. But having that structure in the first place really helps me. It helps me to, to manage the content on the channel and make sure I'm always able to put out content. But it also helps me to just manage reading and to know what I'm going to read next. Knowing what I'm going to read next is really important to me. And I think actually probably always has been. I'm someone who, when I'm reading a book, I'm usually considering the next book that I'm going to be reading. And having that manageable list makes it a lot easier for me to do that. So that's why I am definitely a TBR reader rather than mood reader. And as I say, I've tried being a mood reader and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't fit my personality for whatever reason. So yes, that's why I have a very structured TBR, and that's how it helps me both with the channel and with my reading, and just with the stresses of everyday life as well. It just somehow makes things easier for me. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves. So today I have The Saint by Dan Abnett, which is I think it's the second, I can't remember if it's the second or third Gaunt's Ghost omnibus. So the Gaunt's Ghost series is a series of kind of grimdark sci-fi, I guess, set in the Warhammer 40k universe. So set in the universe of a tabletop strategy game. But these books are great fun. They are very nerdy, I would say. And indeed, I've talked about work in this video a bit, that I was introduced by this series, introduced to this series by someone I worked with who was definitely very nerdy. But they're really fun. They're really over the top. They remind me of the kind of dark enjoyment I used to get out of 2000 AD. The comic when I read that as a teenager. There's a definite kind of 2000 AD vibe to these books. But yeah, fantastically enjoyable kind of future war stories with all sorts of weird religious overtones as well. So I really enjoy them. I've read, I think, the first 3 books in the series. So each of these omnibuses has 3 books in them. So I've read the first 3 in the series, but I need to continue reading them because they're a lot of fun. So I hope you found that interesting, something a bit different for a Tuesday, but let me know, are you a TBR reader or a mood reader, and how do you feel about it? Is it something you've just kind of drifted into, or is it something you've made a conscious choice to do? So yeah, always interested to hear about other people's ways of reading as well as the books they are reading. And as always, hope you're safe and well out there, hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.